Hi, I'm Scott Simpson.
And I'm Sharla Steever.
And this is the Humanity, Human-Shaped Learning videocast for teachers and for others, for all human beings.
That's right.
What is this? This is our, officially our...
This would be our fourth,
Our fourth, but actually, if you're counting, it's just our third.
Because we had an inaugural one.
We had an inaugural, which we numbered 00. So we've got episode 1, 2, and then this one.
This is 3.
3. And as we've said before, we're trying to kind of make the rounds under about 4 different kind of categories. And today's category, I'm going to pull it up on the screen. Today's category, in this episode, we're going to be talking about relational learning. And we've talked about in the last couple of episodes, we talked about uniqueness. We talked about last time we had a really great talk about relationships and the value of that. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about, all of us know that relationships are, I think most of us know that relationships are important. But this time we're really going to talk about how they fit into learning.
Definitely. Yeah. And I would say, in my opinion, I think that relationships are one of the most important things that teachers can do to be successful in their classes, is to form those relationships, not only with their students, but with their students' families, with their colleagues, with their administrators. Relationships, those are things that are infinitely valuable.
And we're gonna come back around to this topic multiple times, maybe not an infinite number of times, but at least a finite number of times. But we're going to come back around because there is so much, and really in each of these 4, there's so much that we can touch. It just gives us really a way to kind of make sure that we're covering some of the bases that we think are really important. At some point, we may also add some new bases as well. Can you play baseball with more than 4 spots? I mean, you got home plate and you got first, second, and third. Mm-hmm. We're kind of in a baseball game. Are there any games that have 5 plates or 6?
It'd be a different game.
It'll be a different game. We'll make up our own game, and we'll hit all 7 bases at some point. But right now, there's just 4. So what we're going to do each time, one of us kind of is in charge.
Yep.
And so I'm in charge this time, which means I call the shots, which is why we're having all this goofy talk here at the beginning, because I'm just killing time.
Oh, okay.
I'm killing time before we get into all that means really is that I've selected both the third thing that we're going to talk about first, which is usually something maybe artistic. Sometimes it's a poem. A lot of times it could be a song. It could be an image that we look at. It could be a video. Although we've talked about not getting into copyright problems, but today it's going to be a poem, and we're going to talk about that here in just a minute. And that's one that I've selected, and then we're also going to take a look at an article. It's actually a blog article by an educator that has some really good things to say. Some personal challenges that they had in figuring out what this means to teach through relationship. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, we'll go ahead and get started, though, with our third thing and have some conversation around that. So I want to preface this. We've talked a little bit about what we taught. You were an elementary teacher. I was a secondary teacher and taught at the college level. And I was also language arts. So quite often what I was teaching was writing and literature and some things like that. So writing was a huge part of my teaching, huge part of my life as a teacher. Part of the way that I dealt with and figured out what I was doing as a teacher was to write about it, poems and sometimes stories and songs and things like that. So this particular third thing kind of jumped out at me, and we'll pull that up on the screen right now. It's a poem, and the name of the poem is called Prompts for High School Teachers Who Write Poetry, and it's by Dante Di Stefano.
Sounds like you could have written it.
I know. See, it just jumped. I think last time you said something jumped off the page for you. Well, this jumped off the page for me. So I'm excited about this one because when I read it, I thought, wow, that is something I wish I'd written. And that's always good. That's a big compliment. When someone says, well, I wish I'd written that, you know?
You were right.
So anyway, we'll take a look at this. We'll pull it up on the screen. I'll give voice to it. And then Sharla and I will, as we do with Third Things, we'll talk a little bit about it. And I may offer a question or two also when we get into that. So we'll get started. Prompts for high school teachers who write poetry. Write about walking into the building as a new teacher. Write yourself hopeful. Write a row of empty desks. Write the face of a student you've almost forgotten. He's worn a Derek Jeter jersey all year. Do not conjecture about the adults he goes home to or the place he calls home. Write about how he came to you for help each October morning his sophomore year. Write about teaching Othello to him. Write wherein of entrees vast and deserts idle, rough quarries, rocks and hills whose heads touch heaven. Write about reading his obituary 5 years after he graduated. Write a poem containing the words common, core, differentiate, and overdose. Write the names of the ones you will never forget. Jenna, Tiberius, Heaven, Megan, Tanya, Kingsley, Ashley, David. Write Mari with nobody's baby tattooed in cursive on her neck, spitting 16 bars in the back row, as little white Mike beatboxed Candy Shop and the whole class exploded. Write about Zuli and Nellie, sisters from Guatemala, upon whom 1,000 strange new English words rained down on like hail each period, and who wrote the story of their long journey on La Bestia through Mexico for you in handwriting made heavy by the Achilles and airs ached in their knuckles, hidden by their smiles. Write an ode to loose leaf. Write elegies on the nub nose of a pink eraser. Carve your devotion from a number 2 pencil. Write the uncounted hours you spent fretting about the ones who cursed you out for keeping order, who slammed classroom doors, who screamed, "You're not my father," whose pain unraveled and broke you, whose pain you knew. Write how all this added up to a life. So lots and lots of images in there that take me back to various different students, that I've had. But what really struck me in this, and I was looking for something that might bring us into the value of relationship in teaching and learning, and I realized that if we just talk about this we really need to use relationship to help get our students to learn. If we talk about it in that way, kind of like a tool, relationship as a tool, we're missing the whole point. Mm-hmm. That relationship is this thing that goes both ways, and that as I, as a teacher, come to know these students, know them in our engagement with each other, in the things that happen, in the odd things that I notice, and as they notice in turn those things about me as well. And we have these various engagements from day to day, from week to week, through months, sometimes even through years, multiple years. If you're teaching high school, you may have the same student multiple years, multiple semesters. You build this whole relational piece that I think works both ways. It helps me as a teacher to know how to meet my students and where to meet them and what will help. But it also helps them to know where I'm coming from, to know, what's he like? Can I trust him? If I tell him something, is that safe? And that's a whole huge thing that I think we can't forget about.
You had mentioned before we started this recording that you haven't had a chance to read through this yet.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad because I had a very real reaction to some of what was shared in here, especially the piece about reading his obituary.
Yeah.
And I had to do that.
Yeah.
I had to, I never had a student pass away while I was their teacher that year. But a very special student to me died just 2 years after graduation. And I couldn't help but hold his memory as you were reading through this. I had him as a little third grader. And even at that point in his life, in third grade, he already saw himself as not good enough.
Yeah.
He already saw himself as, I'm never going to be able to do what my brother does, and there were a lot of issues with his family that I won't go into, but he was sort of coined the troublemaker in school, and I got him that year, and I was so excited to have him because I wanted to figure out what this little guy, what made him tick. And I remember, the thing I remember most about him that year is the second month of school, he asked me if I thought he could be student of the month. And I said, absolutely, you can be student of the month. And I said, let's just work on it. We'll work on it together all year. And we always had to choose someone, with what they, their behaviors that month and that kind of thing. And he did have a tendency to get in trouble. Not so much with me, but on the playground or at lunch. And if those things had happened, they couldn't be chosen.
Yeah.
We got to April, and he hadn't been student of the month yet. And I chose him that month because he had done such a good job. And I submitted his name. And the day after I submitted his name was still in April. And he made a really bad choice. And he wasn't, the principal came to me and said, we can't do this. And so I had to choose someone else. And it was heartbreaking to me. And I knew it was going to be heartbreaking to him because he had tried so hard. And it was, when another child's name was called from my class that month, he came unglued, broke down in tears, and came to me and said, I did so well all month. And so we talked about it. And I said, you know what? We've got one more month. I'm just sure you can make it. We'll do this together. We'll work on it together. And he did. He got it for May. And it was a huge thing, not only for him, but for me, to watch somebody achieve a goal.
Yeah. Well, that first question he asked you, do you think I could get Student of the Month? That's really, I think, at the center of this, because, you could have said no, which would have been horrible. You could have said, well, now, that all depends on you, which wouldn't have actually been much better. And I'll tell you why. He's not asking you. What he's wanting to know. Do you think I have it in me to be that kind of student? And all he needs to know is that you believe, because if you believe that, then that means there's really a chance. Now, we can look at all kinds of research, that says if you as the teacher really don't believe that that's a possibility, then it probably is not a possibility, because unfortunately, as teachers, we sort of have the power to make that happen or not happen sometimes. And I'm not saying I'm not trying to put power in teachers' hands, but the research says that when I don't think students are going to be able to accomplish things, probably in my classroom they're not going to be able to,
Right.
And so he needed to know, when you see me, do you think that I could possibly do that? And that, I think, is the biggest piece of this relational thing with relationship and learning. What does my daily interaction say? What does my noticing say? What does my questioning say? Does it say you're just messing around and you're not going to do anything well in my class? Or does it say there's so much that you're capable of doing? I see that you can do this. You can really do this. I see tons of potential in you, because that's what we want, and that's what we want from relationships. What we want from relationships is someone who can mirror back to us. Maybe it's something we don't know about ourselves. Maybe I really don't think I'm any good. I need someone to let me know I am. Maybe I do think I'm really good, but I know that these stupid teachers just can't see that in me, and they're never going to let me, really excel. And so I'm challenging you. Can you see that? Can you see that I'm brilliant? Can you see that? Can you see that I'm talented? And I need a teacher who's able to mirror that back and to say, yeah, I can see that. And it doesn't mean that the teachers just ignore all kinds of problems. I mean, obviously we're called upon to keep order in the classroom, to make sure things are moving forward, to hold students accountable, all of that stuff. But the relationship part of this has everything to do with communicating. I see the potential. I see the strength, the power, the brilliance, the creativity, the capability in you.
Mm-hmm. When I think back over students that I've had over the years, I really believe that part of the reason I really never had an issue with, I guess you'd call it classroom management and discipline, that was not an issue for me, and not because I was doing anything so much different than anyone else that was also teaching. But I think that effort into relationships, that's kind of a part of who I am. I'm kind of extroverted, and I'm very much a relational person. And so for me to be in a classroom full of students all day, it's got to be more than me just delivering content. It's got to be that relationship. Yeah. And then with this little guy in particular, I never did have a problem with him in my class.
Yeah.
And I think it's because he saw that. He saw the relationship that was there, and it was real.
Yeah.
And that makes a difference. It really does. And so, it may sound trite or small, or I don't know, to say relationships are really important. They are. I mean, but not just that I'm sort of passively doing that, making a comment here and there about something from their home, but rather that when you see a child, when you see that student walk into your room, your eyes light up when you see them, and they notice that. That's the real stuff. And it's so important that it's real. Not just that I'm going to do this because I have to. I'm your teacher. And I will say there are some students that are harder than others to form a relationship with. And I was not able to form relationships with every student I taught. There were some, we had barriers, and I don't even know what they were.
Yeah.
But I think the piece that is very important to add to relationship is authentic.
Yeah. Well, because I think human beings, whether they're students or teachers, they can sniff out the inauthentic.
Definitely.
They know that, and being inauthentic builds up over time, so that there's an expectation now that I'm not going to get the real deal here, and that's a hard thing to overcome. I think when we talk about put it this way, we could put it in the realm of relational learning. We could put it in any realm, though. If for a long time the culture of my classroom or my school or even our district has been a particular thing, you don't get out of that overnight.
Right.
Because our students, our colleagues, everybody in the school, everybody in the community, they have learned certain things about what school is or about what learning is. In this case, if we're not used to having real relationships, it's really just about, I gave you the assignments, you get them done. I'm going to check them with my red pen, and we're gonna give you the grade you got. If that's really the culture of classroom, of school, the following day, the next day, the day after you decide, I'm going to do this relational learning, it's going to be an uphill battle.
Yes.
It's got to start somewhere, though, and it has to build and it has to grow. And I think some of that in the article we're going to take a look at maybe will help with that. But I want to go back to the last line in this poem, or the last little section here. Last line. Write how all this added up to a life. Teaching and learning is it's this really beautiful thing, or it should be. And the beauty of it, I think, is this relational thing that's happened, this dance that has happened between educators and students and students and students and all of us in the school together. How we have this shared knowledge, this shared culture that is both like me and very different from me, because my students are bringing something very different, or my colleagues are bringing something very different. But it's this unique combination of things that happen in our school, in my classroom, in our school year, that are destined to never happen exactly that same way again. And when we talk about the industrial model for education, part of the thing that's wrong with that is it's like based on this assembly line model, like Ford and the Model Ts. The apex of quality is that everything looks exactly the same. Everything comes out, and from year to year, from month to month, it's all just optimized and it's all coming out just the same. And that's not what it's about. It's different every day, and it's a new challenge every day. And it's a new joy every day, and it's new experiences with these people every day. And some days are going to be great, and some days are going to be really difficult. But that's what a life is. A life as a teacher, a life as an educator that you can feel fulfilled about and feel good about. A life as a learner for students, for all of us. So this poem celebrates a lot of wonderful things. It celebrates some things that we don't know about because we don't know all the details. It celebrates some sad, difficult things. But that's I think that's why that last line is so powerful. That's what adds up to a life. And our students have to know that, that their life as a learner is not going to be all A's.
Right.
It's going to be, some days they're going to come up against something that's really difficult.
And you'll still be there.
Yeah, that's the key. Mm-hmm. That we're still in this together. We're still in this together. So, well, thank you. What we're going to do next is we're going to kind of move on to an article. that really addresses some of these same ideas, but from a different perspective. This is once again a teacher. Mr. Stefano is a teacher in New York City, and he's the one who wrote the poem, and he was drawing on his experiences as a teacher. This is an article by Staci Goodman, who is also a teacher. The importance of teaching through relationships, and we'll pull that up there on the screen so you can take a look at that, and we'll make sure that we include the link to this article as well. But I've highlighted a couple of things that I'd like to take a look at. I would encourage you to read the entire thing, but I just want to touch on a few things. Stacey begins by talking about kind of having some misgivings about this whole idea that relational teaching is an important thing, and she shares that part of it is because in her own education, relationships were not a big piece of her engagement with teachers. She didn't feel like it. The teacher-student relationship is kind of a formalized thing. You don't want to be buddy-buddy. She says this formal arrangement discourages fraternizing with students in the belief that when the role of teacher, mentor, and guide becomes confused with that of a friend or a buddy, the instructional waters become muddied. And I can see some truth in that. I mean, have you had colleagues, or maybe you yourself have thought, well, okay, there's the line. That's not, I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here for X. What do you think about that?
I can remember being taught in college in my teacher prep courses. You need to come in, and there is no friendship involved. There is no fun involved. You need to make sure they know who's boss. Yeah. You spend those first weeks, and then you can lighten up.
Don't smile until the second semester.
Right,
That's what they always said.
And I think that was the worst kind of advice you could give a brand new teacher.
Yeah, I know.
And I think lots of teachers still are functioning under that I have to be really hard-nosed and ungiving. I'm not going to allow anything to push my boundaries. And I think why?
Well, I think part of the reason why that's so persistent is we somehow can't see it. Once again, I've said this before, we kind of have this either-or thing. Mm-hmm. Like either I'm hard-nosed, a taskmaster as a teacher, or it's just all fun and games and whatever, and just whoever does whatever, and doesn't matter. And we can't find any in-between space. Mm-hmm. But the in-between space is always where, almost always where things lie. They don't lie on the extremes, and it's lazy, frankly, to just always gravitate toward those extremes.
One of the things that I always kind of held when I was thinking about my role in the classroom is that these students, and again, being elementary with the same kids all day. So these students are spending more awake hours with me than anyone else in their life. Yeah. So what should that experience be like? And if it's all hard-nosed, unbending, ungiving, I'm the teacher, you're the student. What a miserable day.
It has to be affirming of their humanity. Going back to why we have this video cast
and our humanity
and the fact that we're all humans here, and we're engaging. And I'm not unlike my students in so many ways. Mm-hmm. I've been there. I've been where they're at. I still am where they're at. Mm-hmm. We've talked about this before. One of the best teaching tools is modeling what a good learner looks like. When I learn something as the teacher, and my students watch my curiosity and then watch my excitement as I figure something out, that's encouraging for them.
Yes.
So,
and they see the real reaction.
Right.
They see what happens when you get mad. What happens when you're really happy.
Yeah.
What happens when you're super surprised. And sometimes they find buttons they can push that are just kind of fun.
Right.
Because I can make Mrs. Steever really blow her top here if I do this, and hopefully it's not that too often, but those are huge things for kids.
Yeah. So Anyway, Stacey, this teacher, so struggling through this, I'm going to pull up another section here where she's beginning to figure this out. She says this kind of teaching embeds formal knowledge in the world in which it actually belongs and from which it's born, that of the complex, historical, and social world of being human. Teaching through relationships, when done well, recognizes the human stories of the learners themselves. They're not blank slates, as well as that of the teacher. It's an approach that embraces our complex identities, biographies, and the stories we bring that serve to humanize the subjects we teach. The stories that are behind us, that are driving all of us, teachers and students. You know, you and I have done a lot of work with schools that are addressing the needs of indigenous learners. Okay, and we have in our state in South Dakota, we have the Oceti Shakon Essential Understandings, and they're written by indigenous elders, and they have really important ideas that are part of the native, the indigenous communities, and teachers need to learn those, and they need to know about those. Okay, but it's not just this cognitive thing. It's not just learning this and this and this and this about Lakota people. It's also very much about listening and engaging so that I know the story of this kid and of this young woman and of this parent, because their unique stories coming out of their culture, but also coming out of their home life, also coming out of their personal experience, that's where all of the learning and the formal teaching, that's where all of it gets its power.
Right. You know, I can remember a parent that I won't go into a lot of detail, but just her experience with school was horrible. Mm-hmm. And I was being warned about this child coming in my room, and you're going to have to deal with this parent, and it's going to be really hard. And it kind of was at first. Yeah. But as soon as we had an opportunity for her, where she opened up to me and shared a little bit, it was so eye-opening to know that her experience had been really difficult. And that made all the difference. And just like you were saying, listening, taking time to hear that story made all the difference in the world in our relationship that year. Yeah. And it was a turning point, you know, giving an opportunity, giving time to hear, to listen to her, and to really hear her. And let her, you know, share whatever it was she felt I needed to know about her for me to understand her and her son. And
so often it's easy for me to sum up somebody, whether it's a parent or a student, and their reaction, their negative reaction. This parent just doesn't want their kid to learn. They're just negative about school, period. Right. When I don't know the story, when I haven't stopped to realize this mother has had some real experiences that have taught her some things that about what school is about what learning is about what teachers are about, which I'm going to have to help her unlearn not by lecturing her, but by being a different kind of teacher, by embodying what a good teacher is. And, you know, you brought up the indigenous students and learners in our state. With the history we have of boarding schools, there are lots of issues around education for families. And so we need, as teachers, to do that extra step of being ready and aware and knowing that this might not be a real positive thing in this family's, you know, history. And so I need to be the first one to offer some time to listen and to understand. Well, and it requires learning on my part too, because it may be that I'm defining learning and growth in a really narrow way, in a really Western and white way, which is the way I would define it, being who I am. If I begin to learn that there are other ways of defining what learning looks like, what the process of learning looks like, what even learning that there are different ways of defining what success looks like, then I begin to understand where a whole community is coming from, where certainly this particular student, their parents, where they're coming from. And that doesn't come outside of relationship. Right. That's where you learn those things. Because there's not just a handy-dandy little list, And if there is a handy-dandy little list, you want to know how to deal with Native American students? You want to know how to deal with Black American students? Here's the handy list. Don't put any stock in that, okay? That's a handy-dandy list is not a substitute for opening yourself up to getting to know people, to being in relationship with people, because people are more complex than the handy-dandy. I would hate to see the handy-dandy list about me.
Me too.
I would say, yeah,
about me, not about you. I'd rather read yours than mine.
I don't believe in handy-dandy lists, period. So anyway, near the end of the article, putting it into practice, the author says, first, it means getting to know the students' learning styles and where they are in terms of their knowledge, abilities, and potential. But more importantly, it also means getting to know their interests, personality, and backgrounds. And then he talks about a couple of, I think, big names that most teachers are familiar with. Vygotsky, who was a child psychologist who asserted that learning is relational and that language conversation is central to the relational aspects of learning. And how often do we use that language and engagement and conversation as a learning tool?
Oh, yeah.
And when I was growing up in school, quite often, I don't really want to bash my teachers, but quite often, I got the impression that the goal was for us to not talk, to shut up, be quiet, okay? And Vygotsky said, no, if we want learning to happen, that happens among human beings in the process of us sharing stories, language, back and forth, okay? And that's so incredibly important. So, the last little thing that we'll take a look at, the author says, being the spoke in the wheel. So I'll just read this little section. I found myself in a situation where the students were not very friendly to each other. The silence was not that of students focused on their work, but of the social awkwardness of people not able or willing to bridge a social gap. The social grease that very often is seen as a distraction was absent, and I realized the class lacked the social vibe that energizes the classroom. When addressing this problem with colleagues, I was advised that I be the spoke in the wheel, the active agent who builds relationships between my students by getting to know them and asking friendly questions about their interests and background. And that also became a way for them to get to know each other. So, and I really liked that idea of the teacher being almost the social center of the classroom.
Yes.
And being the one, because I know I at the high school level where I taught, I so often suddenly I felt like I stepped on a landmine. I had no idea what was going on between this student over here and this student over here because all of it had happened outside of my classroom. Suddenly they're both in my room and I'm realizing, oh my gosh, things are about to explode, okay? And I don't know what happened and I don't know where, but that's why I think it's so important for us to not try to manage that with rules. Okay, I'm not saying we don't have rules, but I'm saying the best way to manage that is that I really am at the center of the social engagement that happens in my classroom, which means there has to be social engagement in my classroom, that we're engaging with each other. It's not a come in, sit down, shut up, and get to work. It's come in. We're here together as human beings. We're going to do some amazing, exciting stuff today. And
model some conflict resolution.
Right. When that does happen.
Because where else are they going to see it? especially if you have students who come from, less than ideal backgrounds when it comes to home life. If there are
Right.
just, if it's kind of a hostile environment,
Sure.
which I know I had a lot of students who came from that sort of an environment. When will they get that opportunity to actually see people offer grace to each other and maybe forgiveness?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if I don't take that opportunity to model that and ask questions that will lead to that with them, I'm missing an opportunity.
Yeah. And I think this is why our subject knowledge of subject area is important. That's great. Technique for teaching is great. That's important. But being able to help guide, maybe facilitate, maybe mentor other human beings in the art of engaging respectfully with other human beings is probably one of the biggest things we can possibly do as teachers, because it's so incredibly important for everyone's learning, every individual student, and for our own well-being as professionals. I mean, you will burn out if you can't get around to.
And it's something that lasts their whole life.
Absolutely. It goes way beyond the classroom. Yeah. Well, thank you. You know what? I think we've come to that time in our episode in which I relinquish the reins and turn them over to Sharla, who has, I think, some parting words that she's going to share with us, and we'll pull this up here on the screen.
So our quote today that we have for you is from Ken Robinson, a favorite of ours. To improve our schools, we have to humanize them and make education personal to every student and teacher in the system. Education is always about relationships. Great teachers are not just instructors and test administrators. They are mentors, coaches, motivators, and lifelong sources of inspiration to their students.
I love Ken Robinson. Great stuff. Really terrific.
Yes. So thank you for joining us today to talk about this whole important idea of relationships helping students to learn.
Yeah. We are at our core about learning in schools. We can't lose sight of that. But one of the most important things about learning is that we're all human beings, and that the way we learn is in relationship, in community, and making those relationships healthy. That's what improves the learning.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you.
Join us next time.